what's up? It's your host, Tori, and who is ready to be petty? Today, I've got another bonus episode for you. I'm talking about the psychology behind celebrities, where we specifically look at the Kardashians as a case study. I'm joined by Natasha Tewari, an award-winning psychologist with a psychotherapy practice working at the intersection of deep unconscious mind work, neuroscience, and ancient wisdom. She is from London, England, and she is an entrepreneur and an investor. She's been featured in Huffington Post, GQ, Glamour, and many other publications all around the world. It was so great to talk to Natasha. We both love the Kardashians, and it was really fun to look at them in a positive way and really see what we can learn from them and their businesses and their love lives and what we see on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Another very, very exciting part about this episode is that Natasha has put together something special for the listeners of RTBP. If you go to natashatewari.co.uk/petty, so that is NATASHATIWARI.co.uk/petty, for a bundle about how to start your own business, how to manifest like a Kardashian, and how to go viral on Instagram, which I know all of us want to do. So thank you so much, Natasha, for putting that together and coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed this episode, and I hope you do too. If you are liking these deep dives into specific topics, get in touch on Instagram at RTBP Podcast or email me at rtbppodcast@gmail.com and let me know what you want to hear about next. Okay, let's get to the show. I've got a very special guest joining us all the way from London, England. I'm here with Natasha Tewari. How are you, Natasha?
I am so excited to be here with you today.
Me too. I am so glad we could get together. And today we have a very excited episode planned for you. We're going to be talking about why we love celebrities, celebrity cultures, and the Kardashians. Natasha is an award-winning psychologist, and she pitched a Kardashian case study, which I could not turn down. In another life before podcasting, I also studied psychology. So I was joking with the listeners of Ready to be Petty that I was dusting off the old bachelor's degree before this conversation with you.
I'm honored that you did for me. Yeah, no, let's see what happens. I think this will be fun.
Yeah, for sure. So I just have a few questions for you so we can learn a little bit more about celebrities. Who are some of your favorite celebrities? Who do you like to follow?
Yeah, of course. I think it varies probably depending on the mood that I'm in and what I want to get from, like, quote unquote, following someone. So I think when I'm thinking as an entrepreneur or as a businesswoman, or I'm thinking about things around business and investments, I look at people like Sarah Blakely, who founded Spanx.
Yes.
She immediately comes to mind. I know we're going to talk a lot about the Kardashians today, but I love the Kardashian sisters, especially the older ones. And after that, I really enjoy following actually different writers who have really interesting thoughts that will influence in the way that I might think about things.
Yeah.
So immediately comes to mind people like Tim Ferriss, who else? Malcolm Gladwell.
I love that. You kind of mentioned people that might be like aspirational, like Sarah Blakely, and then some people that can just, stoke and provoke thoughts, like some writers. What about the Kardashians appeal to you? Like you are an entrepreneur. They're very successful businesswomen. Is that something that draws you to them?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's that part of it. I think also, speaking as a woman of color, I'm Indian, and so I'm brown. The Kardashians started to come to light as famous women at a time when most celebrities were white.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably a piece of appeal there in that, like, when my own mind and my own thoughts around developing as an adult were coming about, they were also making their space on the celebrity scene. Um, and without doubt, all of their achievements are so inspiring. And of course, that draws you towards them, especially given where they've come from. Like, they came from a place where all of like Hollywood looked down on them, and now they're just absolute darlings in their space. And then I think also another thing that's important to recognize is that as human beings, we are drawn to things that are aesthetically beautiful. And if you think about how the Kardashian sisters position their Instagram feeds, they are aesthetically pleasing to the eye. They are beautiful to look at, like these, swathes of beautiful pictures that have like very neutral filters across them.
I think for me, they were a different type of celebrity that I just
Mm-hmm.
really was drawn to. They were something different than, I think of that time, like of the Paris Hiltons and the Nicole Richies of that landscape. And I just
Yeah.
found that they were someone that I was really drawn to. The other aspect that I really like is the sisterhood, because I have two sisters, and
Yeah.
I think I just loved the TV show and how it depicted, like, obviously a family that is very privileged and wealthy and very different from mine, but there was something that was inherently similar, like their relationships and the way that they would joke with each other or support each other felt very familiar to me.
Right. So I also have a sister, and I think that like more than that is also the way that they fight with each other, and they don't always get on, and it's not always roses. And I think that they were I mean, they were absolutely. There's no question about it. The first family who, rightly or wrongly, that's a different conversation, but put it all out there, right? And I think this is another reason why people who love them, because there's a sense of the fact that yes, of course it's reality TV and there's some manufacturing going on, but actually a lot of it is real, and even that which is scripted is based on something which is very much so real. And so when we're consuming celebrity culture, and that's what we're doing really, right, we're consuming it, it's that sense that you feel some kind of affinity with these people who are living a really exciting life, but also you feel like you have something in common with. And there's I think from a neuro perspective, we're experiencing all of this empathy around feeling like we're connecting with somebody who we have something in common with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up some really critical things there. The first thing is that I wanted to ask you about is just like, why do we care about celebrities? And I think you touched on a few great points. Like, if there's something that we relate to them on, like the Kardashian sisters, the way that we consume the content that they put out, it's just ever present. Like, if you follow
Mm-hmm.
on any social media platform, you get a sneak peek into their life, or what feels like a sneak peek, so we can connect to them on that level. But any other influences of why we care so much about celebrities?
Yeah, so I think if we take the Kardashian example actually first and foremost, the other incredible thing that they did, I think they were the first people to do it, was not only did they invite us into seeing like the good, bad, and ugly of their reality and make it entertaining, but they also invited us in and framed it in a way as if we mattered, right? So if you look back to the early days of Kim's tweeting, she would say things like, "Well, I'm thinking about buying a new dress. Do you like this one or this one?" The bottom line is that we know when we think intelligently, it's unlikely she cares about our opinion, about what dress she's going to wear or buy or whatever. But it created this sense for those people who were already falling in love with her character and already falling in love with her persona and already falling in love with, the story, that you matter to them also. So I think there's that for sure. I think that's really important.
I think you made a great point, because I realized the other day, like, I follow Kim on Twitter, and she tweeted out something like, I'm looking for this new product. It was for her kids. I can't remember if it was like a specific item or like a technique that she was trying with, like, I don't know, say potty training or something like that. But she asked her followers, like, hey, like, do you have any good ideas about blank? And I'm like, you have access to every doctor, every educator that you could ever want, but you're soliciting like suggestions from your fans. Like, that's really intriguing.
Yeah, and this is the thing. We know when we put an intelligent hat on and we think about it, we know that that's not what she's doing. She's just inviting her fans into her world. Of course, like you said, she's got the best pediatric care available. Of course, there's already a plan and a strategy, and also she has 4 children, so she's done it before. But it's they do it so flawlessly, bringing fans into their world. And the interesting thing is that I think other celebrities that previously mocked them have since followed suit because they see the power of that. I guess the thing is, if you're a celebrity, part of your job is remaining a celebrity. And
Yes.
the way you do so is by people caring about who you are and what you do.
Yes. And why do you think that people, if we think about the psychology behind it, why do you think that we don't clue in immediately? Like, clearly, Kim is not asking for my advice on parenting, but like, I read that and was like, I literally in my head was like, oh, that's so nice that she's asking. Like, that was my initial response. Like, I fell for it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, look, and to be fair, there is a real possibility that she has somebody manning all of the replies, and someone's going to come back to her and say, actually, Kim, someone said something really good. I'm sure they wouldn't discount a clever suggestion. But yeah, you're right. I think what's really going on is that there's 2 possibilities why you're following the feed in the first place. One is because you're looking for reasons to, sulk online, and we'll put those people aside. The other set of people who are following, they're following because they're already in love with her, right? There's already some kind of affection towards Kim Kardashian, brand Kim, the family as they exist as celebrities. And so I think it's very much so a primal reaction that we're having. This is somebody who, on some level, deep in your unconscious mind, it feels like you have some kind of vague relationship with. They are already a part of your life. They're already a part of your reality because they are people that you think about. When you think of it that way, it sounds really crazy, doesn't it? But they are. They're people who exist as part of your existence. And so you've got no reason to second guess it. You've got no reason to assume that there's something, nefarious going on. You just assume the best of these people that you like, because that's what we do with people we like. We automatically assume the best of them because we like them and we trust them.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I know that people like hate follow people on social media, but I think in general, people are following people that they appreciate and that they admire. And yeah, I guess consuming the content that they put out, it is kind of like an automatic, like empathetic response that I would come up with. Like, I think that I'm just thinking about some recent things that Kim has tweeted. People were upset, I think yesterday, that she posted a picture of her very expensive horses that North owns. And Kanye was tweeting that her KKW beauty brand was just purchased 20% of it for $200 million, making the company worth $1 billion. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about kind of the maybe more realistic thoughts that people are having around like wealth or celebrities. That I know that this is maybe a little bit less on topic, but people are realizing that, yeah, there's disproportionate wealth and that people are really struggling during COVID-19 and what celebrities are still putting out there.
Right. So this is a really powerful topic, I think. Yeah, especially because we're living through COVID-19. We're also living during the time of mass uprisings because people have had enough of institutionalized racism and the way that that impacts wealth disparity.
Yes.
Um, and so I think you put those things together, plus the fact that, so many of us are locked in our homes, and I think people are already feeling a bit triggered. Um, it's interesting, right? Because I think usually in better times, there is a sense of like them and us. You know that you love a celebrity, and you know you have good feeling towards them, and you know that they're madly wealthy. But it doesn't affect you in any kind of upsetting way because you just have a sense of this is how it is. But at a time such as now, when, like I said, people are already feeling triggered, people are feeling a bit raw, it feels like it's insensitive
Yeah.
because we feel like those celebrities have invited us into their reality. We feel like they've invited us into their lives, and so there's almost like an underlying assumption that's unconscious, but we assume that we matter to them. And so then when you have, for example, a celebrity like him saying, "How gorgeous is this horse? North has 20 of them."
Yes.
And we also have a racing kart track on the ranch. It feels kind of like a slap in the face to people who are suffering, and even more so to people who are suffering but have bought that celebrity's products.
Yeah.
And so then there's a sense of like, you know what? Like, are you trying to throw it in our face? Are you trying to make me know where I stand compared to you? And of course, all of this is completely irrational. Like, Kim's family does not have bad intentions towards their followers when they share this. Likewise, I'm not convinced that followers who are completely upset were ever truly believing that, that their feelings were being considered by the celebrities that they follow day in, day out. But there's been some strange, like, underlying assumption that happens in the unconscious mind, and that's when you get this clash, like what happened yesterday, where people are like, all of a sudden, wait, like, what are you doing? This is so insensitive. Don't you understand how the rest of us are living? Don't you understand that so many of us are suffering? Well, good for you with your billion-dollar company, And I also think that probably it is doubled up with, the controversy around Kylie's company valuation, because it also creates some kind of, like, it creates an atmosphere of distrust, right? When you're saying, okay, one of us says, okay, now I've reached billionaire status. It's like, well, the last time one of you said that, it turned out not to be true. And so when you're what I expect really what their work is to do now in terms of brand image, and if I'm thinking from a business perspective, it's around building up some equity in the trust that they have with their followers and with their fans at the moment. And that was entirely missed with the with the photos that came out yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. I honestly compare it to kind of relationships in real life where I always make the analogy that you have to put money in the bank before you spend it, because that's really what
Yeah.
it feels like. And I guess people like Kim who have this star power and just this staying power as a celebrity has more money in the bank socially than maybe someone that is new to celebrity culture, I guess.
Yeah. Amazing analogy.
Thank you. Since you're coming from the UK, I did want to ask, is it different in your country of how you view celebrities, or is it the same all around the world? Because it's so ingrained. I live in Canada, but we are so influenced by the US, and celebrity culture is so ingrained in the American life. Is it similar in the UK?
Yeah, well, I think we have something comparable. I think it's the same thing. We're hugely influenced by what goes on in America. And if we're talking about reality TV, like, things will come out in the US, and British people who are fans will not wait for it to come out in the UK. We'll find ways to watch it online, or whatever the case may be, streaming it. And so in that case, I'd say, yeah, I mean, totally, there's like the obvious similarity. But I also think in Britain we have other kinds of celebrities. So of course the British royal family, and that's been that's been an institution for centuries and centuries. And I think the relationship that people have here, I think the relationship that some people have here with the notion of the British family is really comparable to perhaps what we see in diehard fans of the Kardashian family. Um, but I would be inclined to say that it same as in the States, there's a spectrum. There are people who don't care at all, and then there are people who are diehard fans, and it would be like an overgeneralization to say that everybody in an entire nation has the same relationship with celebrity.
That is true. Yeah, I think it is so ingrained, I guess, in my life as well, that
Yeah.
Seems that everybody has this fascination with celebrities, but I guess I am also constantly reminded that people aren't, and people don't care as much as I do. But it has been an interest of mine for as long as I can remember. Like, I remember I was talking about this on a previous podcast, going to the lake with my family, and we were picking up, like People magazine. I don't know if you're familiar, or like Us Weekly,
Yeah, I am.
or like those types of magazines on the way to the lake to read at the beach. So I guess it's just also been kind of part of my upbringing that this is something that I should care about.
Yeah, I mean, there's also that for sure. I think, if you've grown up conditioned to believe that this is something that, we as a family do watch, think about, of course you're going to be an adult who is like interested in those things also. And then also I think you touched on something, it's generational, right? Like your parents and like people of your parents' age and like your age and kids younger than you, celebrity is totally a thing. On the other hand, people in their like 70s and 80s who lived through two world wars, they're less interested, right? Because it was not a part of their reality growing up. And it also wasn't a part of their reality in their formative years. And it really wasn't a part of their reality in their, adult years. So it's really clear to see how there's been generational change around relationships with celebrity also.
Do you think that I'm assuming our relationship with celebrities with the advent of social media has changed
Right.
hands down, but do you think that this obsession in these younger generations will continue as like social media seems to also like march on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? I don't think we'd have the same relationships we have with celebrity now if it hadn't been for social media. Um, because social media was the medium through which we got to feel like, and by we, I mean mere mortals, um, we got to feel like we were having some kind of insight our, into, the object of our interests life. And so a parasocial relationship is a one-sided relationship where one person is putting in emotional energy, interest, time, and the other person has no idea that the first person even exists. That's what we have in a relationship between like a celebrity and a fan. And what social media like led people to have was an outlet where they could seemingly interact and seemingly feel like they were getting something back. And I remember when Instagram launched, like someone said something to me like, it was someone who was younger than me. I think I was probably 23, 24, something like this then, maybe slightly younger. But the person I was speaking to was, I think, 16, 17. And she was like, oh, it's amazing because you can like see Kim Kardashian's photos. And it was a Kardashian she referred to. And you can comment and you can like. And it's funny how even just like a few years of difference, that was a teenager then and I was in my early adulthood. But the things that we were thinking about being, important felt so different. And of course, everyone ended up falling into the Instagram craze. But it leads to that illusion that that's what you have. Social media is just becoming more and more and more a part of our reality. Like social media is big business, like brands are behind it. Like there is a ton of influence and power that goes into making social media increasingly a part of our lives. And so simultaneously, without doubt, yeah, that's going to lead to a knock-on effect of celebrity culture and fandom becoming bigger and bigger. And I think that we'll have it, what we'll see really soon is that you'll see children who only know this, children who could not ever imagine that you could live a life not having like this, almost coveted private insight into a celebrity's life.
Completely. And I think another piece that you've kind of touched on is when, for example, Instagram came out, you could post the static pictures on your like profile feed. But now with stories where people are literally just holding up their camera in their own homes, in their bedrooms, in their bathrooms, like in intimate places, you really are getting a snapshot or a look into like their private lives. Like before,
Yeah.
I think, and when you look at like the static feeds, they're often curated, even if there are more personal pictures there from, say, like a family birthday party, for example. But yeah, when people are on Instagram stories or they go live or whatever it is, like it is truly something intimate. It is something that a publicist maybe can't orchestrate as easily, or maybe that,
Yeah.
because I always think when people are going live, like, oh, like, what does their publicist think of? Because the questions that they're getting aren't curated from a host on a TV show,
Mm.
from their fans immediately. And we've seen some doozies where celebrities have responded in like a very inappropriate way. But yeah, I think that like it really does seem like barrier free to looking into their like real lives, quote unquote.
Right. So I think this is also something that leads to like the cult of celebrity, because I think now most celebrities have got smart around that. They've become very savvy about what they want to share, what they want to show that's behind the scenes. And then also, what's behind the scenes, but is not, really truly encroaching on their private lives. And so then what happens is that for you as a fan, when you're consuming that content, you're flicking through stories, unconsciously, you have this sense that you've had access to like their vulnerability. And
Yes.
this comes back to that whole thing around the parasocial relationship, right? The celebrity who's on the other side of that knows that they haven't actually given up anything that they didn't want to, that they're not truly showing you what makes them vulnerable, and what, showing themselves at their most raw. But they know that they're offering you a little something. It's like giving like a corner of the cake away, but you're just so grateful to have that little bit of cake, and because you enjoyed the cake, you have no complaints.
I feel a little bit like dumb. And like I know that again this happens to millions of people, so I'm in good company, but I honestly I feel kind of like hoodwinked and kind of like stupid for kind of, yeah, just this assumption, you're right, that I'm part of their lives when I'm clearly not.
But it's the thing is, it's not a stupidity thing. This is, I think, again, it comes back to these primal needs that we have, right? These primal needs to belong in a group. The moment you're a fan, you belong to a group of people. Like if you think about, I mean, immediately the example that comes to mind is Lady Gaga, her fans, the monsters. There are lots of examples like this that where celebrities do that for their fans. They create community. But also a more primal need I think that we have is, I mean, fundamentally, as human beings, we've evolved to be on this earth, to live as long as we can, to have healthy lives and have healthy children. That is like our most primal need. And having a sense that you are associated with humans that are more powerful, have more resources, have more influence, the need to be able to do this comes from a very primal place where you believe that this increases your chance at survival almost by like osmosis, because you're around it, because you're a part of it. Not it, that's not fair, we're talking about a person, like you're in their world, you're a part of their world. It's almost like you can bask in the glow of that person who is somewhat magical because of all of the power and influence that they wield. And we can't help this. Like this is something that human beings have evolved to do. It's a way that we've evolved to behave. Like to do otherwise would be going against our biology.
Right. Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense, like when you put it in that aspect. And I think that you're right that like people are attracted to people that have more influence, that seem more powerful. Like that is something that has been around long before celebrities. So that is more yeah, a primal need that we're filling. So yeah, I definitely do understand that. I think we've laid a good groundwork of what celebrity culture is and why we're so invested in it. But you specifically wanted to talk about what we could learn from the Kardashians. Is there something that immediately comes to mind?
Yeah, totally. So I guess, I mean, the reason why I said when we were chatting before is I think people get really involved in celebrity culture and then perhaps afterwards think, you know what, how much time have I, and the listeners can't see me, but I'm doing like air quotes. How much time have I wasted, watching like seasons upon seasons of reality TV, or scrolling through feeds when I could have been doing things that improve my life. And actually, if you choose to be astute about things, you can also learn lessons from watching these people who you watch. You watch, the best of them, and you also watch, sometimes the absolute worst of them. And there is information there, and you can take it as though it is intelligence, and you can act on it in your own life. And when I was thinking before, when we talked about taking the Kardashians as an example, the four main things that came up for me was, I was like, we can learn something about our own love lives by watching their complicated, messy, dramaful love lives. We can learn something about what narcissism looks like in practice, both within ourselves and others. I think we can learn something around boundaries, and I think we can learn something around about manifestation also, because I think if you ever wanted to watch somebody who knows how to manifest the life of her dreams, it's got to be Kim, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's great. Let's start about the love lives. Like, we've watched many, many men walk into the Kardashians' lives, like through Keeping Up with the Kardashians or rumored romances in like tabloids. What are some pieces that you're specifically thinking about? Like, I immediately jump to Kourtney and Scott as a very interesting, even when they were together, a very interesting relationship, like a modern relationship where they weren't wed and they had children. They're one of my favorite Kardashian couples, and even the recent rumors that they might be getting back together has gotten me so excited that that's a possibility.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're a great example of a really interesting couple. Um, and of course, if we take them as being an interesting couple, to pick apart what's going on in their lives, it is further made interesting by the fact that he, for, I mean, how long? Like a year and a half, dated a woman who, I mean, wasn't that much older than his oldest child,
Yeah.
and looked an awful lot like Kourtney, right? I think the interesting dynamic there is, um, so in all relationships, we all have things about us, and then we all have things about us that we are lacking. And often, what happens in a relationship is that it's almost as if we are magnetic to somebody who we perceive fills the gaps in ourselves, but they feel the same about themselves, that whatever they are lacking, you provide. And I think what we see, if we apply that to Kourtney and Scott, I think it's almost like Scott brings the fun, but when that goes too far, he brings an absolute, am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
I was going to say shit show, and then I paused myself. So when the fun goes too far, absolute shit show. Kourtney very much so has, and we see it in the regimented way in which she lives, the regimented way in which she approaches wellness. She has a need to be in control, and so when Scott acts out, she is very much so there as the person who controls things and brings things back together. For her, I imagine there is some need to feel like the person in control. And so, if you as an individual have a need to feel in control, what you might find yourself doing unconsciously is creating situations which are out of control so that you can come in and tidy up that mess, right? What that does for you is it leaves you feeling empowered. It leaves you feeling like you have some say over your reality. It leaves you feeling like you are indeed the person who you think you are, and it affirms your identity. For Scott, I think what he has in that though is it's that old cliche that we're looking for our opposite sex parent in the partner that we're with. That's how it looks to a lot of us when we're watching on screen. It's almost like when it gets like that, she plays a maternal role. Um, and so I think there's something really interesting there around, like, if we think about if their relationship was to develop in a more healthy way, that would look like mental illnesses being addressed in a kinder, more nourishing way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also looks like being on the same page around thinking about what do you want your relationship to look like? Do you want your relationship to be a roller coaster? Or actually, are you trying to build something that's more stable? Because if you're trying to build something that's more stable, what you're really looking at is you're working out, okay, where are my insecurities? Where are your insecurities? And how can we grow together by affirming ourselves and supporting each other in that process?
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense, and that does really seem to depict their relationship. Like Scott lost his parents in a when he was a young adult, and
Horribly young age.
really it was really tragic. It was like within months of each other, and so I could see that kind of need for yeah, maternal love, or even that family connection that the Kardashians provide for him, as a only child and a parentless child.
So you can double that up then also with the fact that he was an only child. Healing from losing one parent is a mammoth. Challenge is not even the word either, right? It is one of the most traumatizing things that you can experience. But to lose, like you said, two parents in a short period of time, the trauma there is huge. But also, yeah, remember that he's an only child, right? So there is a such thing as an only child, where your dynamic with your parents is different, and then you lose. It's almost as if you've lost all of your family dynamic in a heartbeat. Whereas again, Courtney is she's the eldest sibling of many, right? Not many of us have a one of five siblings, and so it's also often in the nature of firstborn children to want to be in charge, to be the person who takes a leadership role in the relationships that they have. And so when you add that dynamic of birth order, it also makes things make sense.
Yeah, it actually all this is so interesting. I think it honestly does kind of put some puzzle pieces together. I think a few questions I have from this is like, do you think with the extreme pressure that the Kardashians have, and the world that they live in, and I don't want to say that you can't have a successful career and not have the family life as well, but we do see most of the sisters in relationships that don't last long. Do you think that they will, I don't know, be successful in their love lives? I feel like that has some type of judgment attached to it, and it doesn't mean to, but I look at Kim and Kanye as, I think, the only sister that is like in a long-term relationship right now, in a marriage. And I think that a lot of people, even myself, have even questioned if that is like a relationship built in love, or is it kind of one of those kind of more, it just works out because like a political relationship, like we both enjoy the same things, we are business people, and this just kind of works out for us.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So let me refer to another couple as it pertains to this conversation. So if we think about Chloe for a millisecond, then I forgot her name. So if we think about Chloe and Tristan, that is a perfect example of the relationship that you're referencing. Doesn't work out, is a bit of a mess. Obviously, the way that their relationship started, probably not ideal. He was already in a relationship with a woman who was about to have his child. And then he repeats his same behavior with Chloe. So this is a thing that humans do. We develop patterns for the way that we move in the world. And those are usually things that we learned when we were very young about how to navigate situations which we find emotionally challenging. We don't even know that we're doing it, but what we're really learning is a coping mechanism. And so when the opportunity comes up to behave in a certain way that makes us feel like we are coping with a situation which is emotionally overwhelming, we go back to that behavior. I'm not saying that he was cheating on people as a child, but I'm saying that there will have been behaviors that he picked up in childhood that have added up to this. Because it's almost uncanny that you can cheat on one pregnant girlfriend in late pregnancy and then do it again.
Ah,
And obviously people were just awful to him about this. And probably rightfully so. It's not a great way to behave. But there's probably something underlying there. But the interesting thing is that what we see with Chloe is that this is not the first time that she's experienced a relationship like this either, where there's been some form of betrayal and she's been almost some kind of a martyr in the relationship, and then it continues. And it comes back to that thing that, we all have something about us that's lacking, and unconsciously there's a sense that somebody else fills the gap. Maybe. And of course, I can't be sure because I'm not doing, a psychotherapy session with either of them, but potentially, it may well be the case that Chloe has a need to feel like a savior. She has a need to feel like, almost like, a savior martyr type complex. I would say on the other side of the spectrum, we saw Kim go through a series of relationships. And actually, it seems like what she has with Kanye is the most grounded relationship that we've seen her in. And maybe it's because I'm a romantic and I'm an optimist, but I very much so think that their love is grounded in something real and authentic. They've both spoken a lot about how they had a friendship which just got richer and richer over time. And lots of relationships start out this way, I guess, that one person is into the other person and the other person takes some time to catch up, but they get there. And then, of course, the fact that what we see with them is that they both have their own endeavors, professionally and personally, but they support each other. They keep big elements of their relationship private. They have boundaries around that. And of course, the fact that they've had 4 children together and they're still going strong. Yeah, of course, no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. But if we compare it to what we are seeing with other couples, that is definitely a more inspiring picture of the fact that you can have love and all of the success that we see Kim experiencing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I truly think you've hit the nail on the head with both of those analyses, because you're right. Like, I think Chloe has even talked about this kind of role that she has been put in. She was the youngest. I think she had a relationship with her dad in the midst of like the divorce between Kris and Robert Kardashian. And I do think she does have this idea that she was like maybe like a mediator in the middle, and I think that that's kind of translated to her romantic relationships. And with Kim and Kanye, like I do agree that like the friendship, like it does seem real in that sense. They do seem to fill gaps that maybe each other have, and they do have a lot of really common interests and kind of wild ideas that I think really play well off of each other.
I was going to say the interesting thing also that you just said about like Chloe is the way that you described her behavior as she describes her behavior during her parents' divorce. It's very much a typical middle child syndrome, you know? And I think there's a place also with that, with, feeling like you're lost and feeling like you're a bit ignored. And then how that pertains to your adulthood is that you're no way ever going to feel lost or ignored again. And this is also, that need to not feel not seen.
Yes.
It's also almost like an invitation, energetically bringing in opportunities to be seen, which leads to a creation of drama and controversy.
Yeah, I think, we can see that with even Tristan, but also Lamar before that. Like it seems
Yeah.
kind of a consistent pattern. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing that you mentioned was narcissism and healthy narcissism. Can you explain to the listeners what that is?
Yes. So this is something that is so I get really into thinking about it and talking about it. So the idea of narcissism comes from the ancient myth about Narcissus, who discovered his reflection, and he was so in love with it that he was looking at himself in the water reflection in the river, and then he was so into it he drowned looking at himself. And I think the word now narcissist, it just gets bandied around a lot. By a narcissist, we mean somebody who is self-involved, that they are vain, that they're selfish, that they're only interested in themselves, and that somebody who is suffering from this state of being is overly obsessed with admiring themselves. And I think actually people throw the word around a lot when they're referring to selfie culture, which I think is really interesting for two reasons, especially given our conversation. One is that I think selfie culture has massively been shaped by Kim Kardashian.
Absolutely.
But secondly, I think that when people want to call and often it's a woman, we don't hear it being bandied around when we talk about men. When people call women narcissists because they take lots of selfies, it's interesting that there was never like really such a loaded term being pointed at men when like men were taking pictures of women. But it's almost as if that now that women have taken control of their own visual identity and how they want to be seen, this like really loaded label is being put on it. And so I think, of course there are some people who are truly narcissists in the clinical way of thinking about it. But actually, when we're referring to healthy narcissism, what we're really talking about is taking yourself seriously, considering yourself as being important, having healthy boundaries around yourself, your image, how people treat you. It does not have to be this like really ugly picture of somebody who, like I said at the beginning, the story of Narcissus who drowned looking at himself. It doesn't have to be that. And I think that actually, given that the Kardashian sisters have really been architects of selfie culture, we can really see in them healthy ways in which to love yourself. And of course, there's a conversation to be had around, what about all of the plastic surgery and modifying your body and modifying your face and the face tuning? And there, of course, things can go too far. But definitely, I think that if you choose to take control of how you feel about how you're being seen, and you take pride in your own image, and you choose to own that, rather than somebody else projecting onto you what they believe you should look like and what they believe you should feel about yourself, then absolutely, if we're going to call it healthy narcissism, let's call it that and let's celebrate it.
Yeah, I think that is really astute. We talked at the beginning of our conversation about if you're consuming their content in a more conscious way, or you're seeing what information you can glean from it in a more productive manner. I totally agree that this is something that we can learn from them. I truly do, because I think that those girls have a really, like, they're confident and they have a healthy image of what they look like. And you're right, it has been twisted in a way that maybe is,
It's misogynistic,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I don't know that we've ever said this about, as a culture, said this about like men who are athletes who, celebrate their bodies.
I think it is gendered. Like, it is weird to think like there is such this power of being confident in yourself, and then when you share that with the world, what you're getting back is you care too much about yourself and your looks and your body. And but before that, it's was rooted in like shame. And
Yes.
yeah, so it is really interesting that it is already evolved into maybe something negative.
So here's the thing about the shame piece, right? It's like your body can be, like totally gorgeous and wonderful. And it's all of those things if I, as a man, am enjoying it in whatever medium that may be. But the moment you enjoy it about yourself, that's when it becomes shameful, you as a woman.
Yeah,
And this is where we have work to do as a society, right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think of like all of the pictures that Kim posts that like are nude or topless, and a lot of the people that are giving her flack are also women. Like, what do you think about that?
But we are all a product of the societies that we live in, right? So even those women who I think will criticize, they've also been fed all of these, patriarchal messages about how you should present yourself and who your body belongs to and what is shameful and what is not and what a good girl does, right? We all grew up with those messages since we were tiny about how a good girl behaves and how a respectable girl behaves. And this is why I think I really have a lot of respect for the Kardashian sisters, again, especially Kim, because I think she really spearheaded. I mean, we know that she really spearheaded all of their careers, but that whole, naked selfies till I die, that was like such a moment of dissidence, It takes courage to say something like this when so many people are attacking your right to show your body as you wish.
Yeah, this is so interesting to me. Like I truly believe the healthy narcissism. Like I find that so interesting. Like I've been considering a lot lately about like self-esteem and self-confidence and the way we view ourselves and the way that we um put time and effort into putting ourselves first. And I really like that that's something that we could take from the Kardashians. Like, I think that is so fascinating that like that could be one of the positive like outcomes of this entire family.
Yeah, I truly believe that in generations to come, like, kids will study the way in which they changed media and lifestyle and like the entire celebrity culture. And, they are like American royalty.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're definitely viewed like that. Another thing you mentioned that you wanted to talk about is boundaries. What did you specifically mean? When I think of boundaries, I think of myself as a fan consuming people like the Kardashians. Is that sort of along the lines of what you were thinking about?
That's super interesting. That wasn't how, yeah, I mean, there is that element of it. I think it's healthy for all of us to think about what boundaries do we have in place around the parasocial relationships that we have in our lives. Like, how much time am I really spending a day, a week, consuming the realities of other people who don't know I exist? Um, and how is that impacting my mood, right? For lots of people, spending hours and hours on Instagram is just not good for your mental health. You find yourself in comparisonitis, which is, comparison is the thief of all joy. I feel like it was said by a clever philosopher, but we all know it to be true. And is there a place in which you can dial it down so it's a place where it's a source of fun and it's a source of inspiration, but it's not something that's affecting your mood or affecting the way that you see your life? Um, but I would also add to that it's like we can learn something about how to manage boundaries in our own relationships by watching them. So, I mean, you referenced earlier about Scott and Courtney's relationship. It's so interesting to see how their boundaries exist around managing co-parenting, right? So many viewers have so much judgment around where boundaries sit and then where boundaries appear to be either not there or just entirely inappropriate. And so I think that's really interesting. But I was really thinking about the episode when um, the sisters like ended up in a physical fight.
Yes.
I think for lots of us with sisters, that was vaguely entertaining to watch because we all watched and we are like, okay, so like really, yeah, it's not just me and my sister who can have really fiery fights. Again, comes back to the reality of things. But yeah, I mean, that is also true when we argue and when we fight over things that are really close to us, and we have a lot of emotion tied up in it, but we don't know why we have so much emotional tied up in it, and it's triggering these unconscious wounds from many years before. I mean, this is what happens. We end up in arguments, we end up in fights, we say things that we don't mean. Maybe we say things that we do mean, but we wouldn't have said them if we were not feeling so triggered. And I think when we watch other people allow their own boundaries to be broken, or we watch relationships where it's clear that the boundaries just don't seem healthy,
Yes.
It gives us an opportunity to look at our own lives and think, you know what, is that going on in my life too? And if it is, what can I do to take some power back, use this to empower myself to actually have relationships that I feel really good about and that are actually really healthy.
Yeah, I think even referring to the fight, the infamous fight earlier this year, that was Courtney trying to restate her boundaries about
Yeah.
TV show, and Kim and Chloe just absolutely not having it. And we see Courtney try to do this for, like, honestly, the past couple years.
Hmm. So this is what's interesting though, I think, and this is where it gets convoluted and yet, I mean, basically just super interesting. The conversation around boundaries that there is happening is Courtney is saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't enjoy this. This does not enrich my life. I don't want to be here. Those other two girls are there, girls, grown women. I need to start calling grown women girls. um, her sisters are there, just kind of confused because they're like, well, nobody put a gun to your head when you signed a contract. And so obviously something's happened there. It happens a lot that we do things. I would say it happens more so for people who have got inner work to do yet for themselves around their self-worth. But lots of people do find themselves in situations that they've agreed to do something which they didn't want to do. And so what that does is it just triggers this big, fiery emotional response. And when you get to a place where you've run out of words to use, much like a small child, you resort to a physical action because that's the best way that you can expel all of this energy that's inside of you. Um, and that's what happened there. Everybody believes that they are doing right by their boundaries, and everybody believes that they're respecting each other's boundaries. I think there was a moment when, like, Chloe says, like, okay, let's talk about it. And Courtney's almost like she just doesn't have the words, right? That's her inner work to do. Like, that's the work that she needs to do internally so she can express herself differently externally. That whole scenario would have probably gone differently if she had the words to use in that moment, but she didn't. Um, Nobody was wrong. That's the thing, right? Watching it as, but also we know that when we're in those relationships, when we're in those experiences with people who we're super close to, there are fewer boundaries because we can speak our truth with those people without fear of repercussion. So everybody was right and everybody was wrong at the same time. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
nobody. But it was an interesting situation because everybody's feelings were so tangled up with the fact that almost like everybody's boundaries were being respected, and then also it was clear that people felt like they were not. Because on the flip side, the Chloe and Kimberly have this anger that, well, we always have to put in more work because you don't show up. From their perspective, it's them whose boundaries aren't being respected. It's fascinating.
It is so fascinating. I've talked about this on the podcast before of, like, the only people that didn't or were surprised by that fight were people that don't have sisters or brothers.
Exactly what I said to you before. Like, yeah, like sisters watched it and they were like, oh yeah, like, this happens in other families too. And it's because with a sister, and I think this happens more between sisters than it tends to brothers, is that there's a depth of intimacy that means that, like I said, you can say what you need to say without fear of repercussion because whatever it is, you'll work it out in the end. And I think that's truly why it got so fiery so fast in the moment.
Completely. And I've also discussed Courtney's, like, inability to communicate on this podcast too. Like, it just seems so interesting. We always bring up that, like, viral, it became like a meme, but when she was talking with Scott and she goes like ABCDEFG, and then he's like, what does that mean? And done with this conversation, like, I'm leaving. And it does seem hard to watch, yeah, when she can't necessarily find the words to communicate how she's really feeling.
And this kind of avoidance is also a defense mechanism that comes out of the fact that at some point you experienced something that was overwhelming. Your mind, body, soul, on all levels, experienced it as a trauma. And so what was probably learned, and again, like I said, they call this wild analysis when you're analyzing somebody who you haven't spent time with. Obviously, I've not had any psychotherapy time with her, but what I imagine what happened was that at some point in her younger years, what she learned was was that when I speak the truth of what I feel in its absolute honesty, its most honest state, um, I'm not heard, I'm not accepted, and maybe even I no longer feel emotionally safe.
Yeah.
And I think lots of people will hear that and it will resonate for them and they'll think, yeah, I've done that too. I have not spoken what was true for me for fear that like I would no longer feel safe afterwards. Like I would be excluded or I would be, told whatever paraphrasing of, you're not a good girl.
Yeah.
And therefore you're not acceptable and therefore you're not loved. I can't love you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we also, with boundaries with the sisters, see as a third party, we see this dynamic of this boundaries crossing or like these needs not being met. But obviously, when you're in the moment, when this is your real life, you don't see it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, this is it's that whole phrase about. I don't know if Canadians say this, but we have a phrase in the UK about when you're like in a bit of a sticky situation, you cannot see the wood from the trees.
No, well, yes, it's not super common, but yeah, I definitely have heard that.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of variations of the same idea. It's that when you're so close to a situation and you're emotionally tied up in it, it's really hard to see things rationally. And also, of course, everything in our unconscious minds is in our unconscious mind on purpose. Your psyche does not want to have to think about what's in the unconscious mind. So really, that's where all of the answers are. And this is also where you're, probably avoiding. And there's a dynamic where all of them interact.
Yes. The one other thing that you mentioned was manifestation, which is so interesting to me because I think it's actually becoming very popular. Other influencers or celebrities that I follow speak about manifesting their careers or manifesting the opportunities that they have been given or that they've taken. And I think we've seen this throughout the entire Keeping Up with the Kardashians series, the girls seeking additional support or tapping into like other people, like you mentioned before, mediums, psychics, kind of the whole lot. What do you think we could learn from that? Like, how could we manifest the same opportunities for ourselves?
Yeah, totally. So I think this is fascinating. Again, so for me, in my work as a psychologist, I have a private practice, and I work with people who are either wanting to heal from things that they've gone through, and they could see that there's patterns in their lives that they want to put behind them and make part of their past. Um, but also I'll work with people who are ready to manifest everything that they want. And that might mean that they're ready to sort out their heads so that they can manifest big love, or they want their business to like blow up, or they want to raise at work, they want to make more money, all of these things. They recognize that all of these things will come from them. And so then they're ready to make changes internally to change their external reality. And what I always see when I do this kind of work around working with the deep unconscious and working with neuroscience and working with ancient wisdom, what happens is to an individual is that you change your ability to manifest. And if I take all of that and then I look at what I see with the Kardashians, it's the idea that we're always manifesting, right? We're always creating our own reality. That's what I mean by manifestation, ultimately, taking your psyche and then thinking about your energy and then what kind of a result that creates in your life. And it's interesting because we've talked about their love lives, we've also talked about business. We're always manifesting our reality, and we've seen these women obviously manifest incredible things around business, money, career, right? And then we've also watched them manifest interesting things in their love lives. And then we've also had like the real pleasure of watching some of them turn it around, like go from 72-day marriage with a man who doesn't seem to be treating you right, to finding the love of your life was underneath your nose the whole time, right? And I think that's the big lesson, is to remember that you're always creating your own reality. but the way in which you create your reality is coming from inside your mind. When you change your internal reality, that is what causes a shift in the way that you create big things externally.
Right. And I think like my understanding of manifestation is probably super superficial. Like when I think of manifestation, I think of like having a goal and repeating it to yourself like an affirmation and keeping it top of mind, and maybe that like subconsciously directs your behavior. But is there more to manifestation that I'm missing?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, totally, because the way that you describe it, imagine if you were doing that in a relationship, right? Like there's a guy who you like, so you think about him all the time, he's top of mind, you're like running it over like a mantra. Like that's not great energy. Like that's exhausting energy. It's definitely not sexy. Like it's not. And equally, if you're doing it at work, you're thinking, I want to raise.
Yeah.
If you're doing that same thing every morning, you're thinking, I want to raise, I want to raise, I want to raise, I want to raise. When is my boss going to notice that I deserve a raise? I want to raise. It's very anxious energy, right? I think that the way manifestation happens at its best, at its most intentional, is when we have a very clear sense of our worth. The way that you get there is by clearing out all of the impact of any trauma that you've experienced throughout your life. And then you combine that with how you manage your own energetic states, and then combine it further with really embodying everything that we know from ancient lineages. So, ethnically speaking, I'm Hindu. I'm very much so into yoga and meditation and the ancient Vedic traditions. And so for me, the way that I think about manifestation, I take from all of those things. And I think that in my experience, when somebody experiences all of those things in an embodied way, and they progress and they grow and they heal and they rise, that is when you're in a position where um, you just become at one with everything that you want. And that's when everything that you want just falls into place.
Yes.
And of course, different people have different ideas about how to go about manifesting things, but I really think it's that simple. And I imagine I would not be shocked at all if, like, we took the example of 72-day marriage through to love of your life, and he was always waiting there for you. He was right under your nose, and he came to be when you were ready. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, like, Kim had been doing some kind of inner work and she had some kind of inner shift in the way that she thought. And then, sure enough, this relationship came to blossom. And I often think that's how things are. It's like the things that were meant for you were always meant for you. They're just waiting for you to be ready to receive them.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot more sense. And I think that like it is true if you are working on those things yourself or developing different skills or reflecting on things that you've done that you want to leave in the past, things that aren't serving you,
Mm-hmm.
right? That your outlook changes, your view on yourself changes, and that just attracts probably different opportunities.
Yeah, totally.
I love that. I think that's something that I really am going to look into. I think it's something that's super, super intriguing to me. And like I've seen it obviously happen before where, you just realize things aren't working for you and you need to make a change and then like continue to come to you.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's how it happens, right? For lots of people, they get to a place where they say, do you know what? Enough's enough.
Yeah.
I want more than this in my life, and I'm not scared to say it.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's a really good note to kind of wrap up on because it's kind of a positive one of what we can truly learn from the Kardashians. And I think that's something that, we could definitely take away from them. Is there anything else that you wanted to speak to about the Kardashians or about celebrity culture?
Not that I can think of now, but if listeners have questions or they have thoughts or something resonated, I'm on Instagram at I am Natasha T, and I love hearing from people. So if you have questions that I didn't answer, totally DM me.
Amazing. And you were speaking about something that you would like to offer to the listeners of Ready to Be Petty.
Yeah, I was so excited to come on. Usually when I talk on podcasts, it's about things like psychology, psychotherapy, business, and I think this is the first, and I don't know if there'll be more, but I expect it's probably going to be the first and last in a while where I get to spend an hour talking about celebrities. Yeah, so I was very excited to come on. And so in celebration of it, I have a little present for listeners of Ready to be Petty. If you go to my website, natashatiwari.co.uk/petty, there is a bundle there for you. There is a little something on how to manifest like Kim Kardashian. A little something on how to start your own business if you have been living in this climate of COVID and you're ready to take your financial destiny into your own hands. And then also how I went viral on Instagram. So I have 33,000 followers on Instagram, and I get asked a lot about how I did it. So there's a little something on that there for you too.
I love that. That is right up all of our interests. And I really encourage anybody to reach out to Natasha. Again, if you have any questions or if any of those things resonate with you, I think that's great. So as you mentioned before, the listeners can follow you on Instagram at I am Natasha T.
Yes. T as in the letter rather than the drink.
Yes, or the spelling.
Right, exactly. That's why I was like, I should probably clarify.
I love that. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
That you were excited and that this is something a little bit different for you. I really love when you can meld your interests like together. Like I love celebrities, but I also am really interested in feminism and gender and psychology. So this has been, a real treat for me.
Oh, no, me too. I've had such fun.
Good. Thank you so, so much.
My pleasure. Bye.
Thanks for listening, and thank you again for Natasha for the awesome episode and analysis, as well as putting together that gift for RTBP listeners. I really, really hope and encourage you all to check it out and get in touch with Natasha if you have any lingering questions about the Kardashians. If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow along on social media at RTBP Podcast. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also join our Facebook group so we can talk about these topics off air. You can find us at Ready to be Petty Podcast Group. I'd also appreciate it if you left a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It helps the podcast find new listeners. Anyways, I hope you are staying safe and healthy out there. As always, I'm your host, Tori, and I am ready to be petty. See you soon. Bye.